It is Maximizing Youth Performance, and I am actually joined by 4 performance experts from around the world. And I'm excited to introduce my panel, and I just want to double check, are we mic'd and ready to go? I believe we are. First, I'd like to introduce Matthias Schaubert from FC Schalke, who is the head of youth, which I think is actually a fabulous title, by the way, an absolutely fabulous title. Next, I'd like to introduce Andy Gard from US Soccer, who is the youth national team sports scientist. And next is Carlos Romagosa from the Thailand FA. He is the technical director. And last but not least, Derek Broadley from Charleston Battery. He's the youth technical director. Performance has become the watchword of elite youth soccer. It is the lifeblood of professional teams, both for the first team as well as the opportunity to sell players and put money in the bank for players around the world. In the US, this has become more important than ever before, as much as anything also to be able to populate our US national team. That's an important task. It's a task that is a new area. I want to say it's a new area of science. It's obviously not, but at the same time, it's one of those things that's become more and more important as we go along. And what I'd like to do is actually start, if I may, with Derek. And what I'm doing right now is I have also got some technical problems. You know, what is it that everything works perfectly until you stand up, and at least we don't have a PowerPoint. That's a move in the right direction. Derek, what I'd like to ask you actually, would you give us some insight into the differences in getting players to the professional level in the US compared to the other teams and countries that you've worked in? Because you've had a lot, several anyway.
First and foremost, you know, the pathway for any player is always a tough one. But when I was at Crystal Palace, there was a set structure set out by the FA under the Charter for Quality. Here in America, it seems to be a lot more, there's a lot more layers, and I think a lot of it stems from, you know, we're now coming out of the age where a lot of kids wanted to go to college. There's more pathways now because there's more professional clubs. It's not, you know, I think the DA in America now is maybe, 10, 12 years old. So, you know, maybe we come to the stage now where that needs to be redeveloped because, you know, the professional clubs are starting to take more ownership. I think the biggest issue now with the pathway to pros and why maybe so much money hasn't been invested in youth compared to other countries is because there's no sort of market for buying and selling players right now. Okay, I think it's a child labour law that hampers that. But when it comes down to, you know, is there talent, is there opportunity, I think that is starting to change, and I think that, you know, over the coming months and years that you'll find that there will be more players now that maybe are interested in going straight to the pros as opposed to going through college. The process for that, you know, comes down to, you know, the networks and the support networks that are in place for these young players. I mean, academies now in Europe, particularly in England, you know, they're vast. When I started at Crystal Palace, I think we had like 10 staff, and that was full-time, and now there's like 40 in most academies. You know, you've got sports scientists, you've got education and welfare officers, you've got different age group coaches. So I think America is catching up, and I don't think it'll be too long before you start to see more kids on that pathway to the pros because there's going to be more opportunity.
I'm just curious, and maybe this is too hot of a topic to actually drop in this group, but do you see the DA evolving in the US to be at that level?
I think the DA was set up to improve national team football, and I think what's happening now is that the big clubs are actually saying we can develop players in our own format. You know, we've got our own goals, we've got our own direction, and America's national team will still benefit from that because it's American players getting a different perspective. I think to have one way to play across all 172 DAs, it doesn't help football development. Now you've got the Atlanta way or the Charleston Battery way or the Seattle Sounders way, and I think the players, individual players, will still benefit from having that different exposure.
Sure. Carlos Romagosa, noted to me as he arrived that he was actually on a plane from Thailand for longer than he was going to be in Miami. So I appreciate you making that journey.
Thank you.
Carlos is an author of a book on performance called Iconos. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah.
Great. And I wanted to talk a little bit about you're using self-assessment as a strategy for optimizing the performance of your players, and you're using video for that self-assessment. Can you tell us about that and how that's working and how others might be able to use it as well?
Then one of the most important things to improve the level of the players is that the players understand the game. Then one tool what we are using is self-analysis. Then we are recording all the matches, we are selecting some videos and giving to the players the tools to analyze themselves and explain what are the key points to analyze each video. It means that we try to choose what are the strength points, the weakness of the player, and try to tell them, to explain to them what is the way that they have to analyze themselves. Because in fact, we don't want that the coaches will be who say that is good or that is bad, this is a good movement or bad movements. We want that the players themselves understand what is the way that they have to resolve the problems. Then we are using self-assessment in that way.
You're actually teaching perception as a specific piece of your content. That's fascinating. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, but our goal is to try to develop intelligent players. Then to perform during the match, we need players who take good decisions, good decision makers. But the first strategy to take good decisions is to improve the perception. Because if you don't know what is happening, it's very difficult to choose the best option. Then we are trying to train with drills specific for improve the perception. It means that the players have to know where is the best position to take information. What is the body angle that they have to keep to get information? How to turn the head to get information, and what kind of information they need to get to take the good decisions. For us, if the players is not able to get good information, it's a player who is impossible to take a good decisions. Then for us, in each program, must be a specific content for perception as one of the main tools to improve the perception, the decision making of the players.
I would imagine that's incredibly powerful. Decision making is almost everything in some ways, isn't it? Our next, Andy Gard, has a cool title. He is sports scientist for U.S. Soccer, for the youth soccer national teams. One of the things that you and your department has really brought to the table is not new, but a really expanded use of data in terms of players, and that's been a key area for you. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think data is so big in kind of sport these days, whatever sport you're in. And my job as the physical coach, I think, is to try and utilize that data, interpret it as best I can, but then disseminating it to kind of technical coaches, the head coach, and the multidisciplinary team. So not just coaches and fellow sports scientists, but the medical team as well. So everyone is aware, communicating and on the same page. But I think ultimately the decision is for the head coach. It's my job to collect it, interpret it, but advise and recommend. But again, the decision is the coach's. But I think it's really important with the data you collect, whether it's training load data, match data, testing data, maturational kind of monitoring and data, whatever it is, it needs to be interpreted with context. That's really, really important. Okay, why is it this number? Why is it that number? High isn't always good and low isn't always bad. There's a reason behind it. And I think there just needs to be that kind of, there needs to be impact. So whatever you're collecting, data-wise, again, GPS, subjective RPEs, wellness, whatever it is, it's got to have impact on your practice. The coach has to have an understanding and buy-in for that, as well as the players. But if it's not having impact on your team or your players individually, then I don't think there's any need to collect it. So if it's simple and having impact, then you kind of, you're really looking to, again, have a direct impact on the team and their performance. So a myriad of data, but it's finding the right sources that's going to have impact in your environment, which may be different from someone else, or even that sport. And I think in soccer, we always talk about the game being the reference. So if we use the game, understand the physical demands of the game, that then filters down. So you can work back from that, understand the positional demands, as well as what's on that individual themselves, depending on their age, their gender, and on all other kind of contextual factors. So if you work back from the game, you can then use all your different sources of data to impact that player, the position, or the team much more effectively. But try and keep it simple.
Thank you. Matthias, a question for you, and it really brings the data question a little further forward. And I'm going to put this as a two-part because I know what's your youngest team in your academy and why, but also from what age group does data and technology really play a role?
Our youngest team is the under 8.
And that's the interesting part. It is under 8.
Really interesting, and it's really important for us because we are a big club with many members, and if you have homegrown players, and we want to have many players in the youth and also in this age, and we want to bring them up to the professional teams. And also now the time in the childhood changed a little bit in Germany. So I think not only in Germany, you know it, every child is looking on his smartphone, on his tablet, and everywhere. And they don't go out after school for play soccer or do some other sports. And therefore, we decided to have a younger team with the under 8s, so that we bring them to the facilities to play football, because at home they don't do this. And that's the reason why we're going younger and younger, because we want to do the work. As I was a child, I went out and played football and were with my friends and everybody. This changed because of the new technology, everything like this, and we want to bring them to our facilities to have good training, to have, again, this street soccer like this. And with the data in our academy, we are a little bit later with this, because we have the philosophy to let them play football, let them have fun for playing football. Make a one-on-one, make games, not structure, and data. So we begin in the age of, let me say, 15, 16. Before, nothing. The only data we have is address, phone number, and stuff like this. So all these data from heartbeats and everything like this, we begin with under 16, under 17.
That is amazing. How important is the Youth Academy to your club?
Sorry?
How important is the Youth Academy to your club?
Very important. As I told you, we're a club with over 100,000 members, and if there is a player out of the Youth Academy playing for the first team, they love him. And also the rules in Germany are that you have to have some homegrown players, and also you have to have an academy that you can get the permission to play in the Bundesliga. So you can't play in the Bundesliga if you don't have an academy, and therefore the academy is so important for the club. On the one hand, because of the homegrown player and the thing that the crowd, the fan base, want to have these players. It doesn't matter if they are really good or playing so good. If they are on the pitch and they give everything, they run, they fight, the 60, 70,000 people in the stadium, they will clap their hands and say, great, you are so great, because the identity with these players is so big, and therefore it's so important that we build up these players to our professional team.
Great. I'm going to start this question with Andy, but I'd like to open it up to the group. How are sports science themes in general useful to youth and academy soccer players' developments?
I think they really complement what they would do on the technical side as well. There needs to be a pathway, a set pathway that has logical progression. So whether it's from the U8s, U9s, and all the way up through the 20s, 23s towards the first team, there needs to be kind of a degree of continuity. So maybe you have some basic progressions of movement patterns, exercises, and general kind of strength and conditioning. With the younger ages, can we kind of make sure they move efficiently before they start to progress in their kind of strength and conditioning programs as they move up? So can they squat well? Can they do a split squat, a lunge? Can they hinge at their hips or hold a plank? Do a basic 2-leg bridge? These things, even primal movements. Can they crawl kind of effectively and hold their limbs? Can they coordinate their limbs, dissociate their limbs in certain ways, but then progress that? So I think there needs to be a physical literacy pathway as well, which is obviously similar to what they might do on a kind of a technical, tactical side with the coaches. So I think sports science can have a framework and support that with data, with kind of physical fitness testing. Stage of maturation as well is kind of a big thing. So with US soccer, we've obviously started to try a lot of more initiatives with the biobanding and comparing kind of chronological age groups and moving more on the biological development side and that stage of maturation. So last year we did a great kind of event in Texas where there was boys and girls teams from kind of U13, 14, 15, even up to 16, I believe, which was received really, really well. So there was kind of a physical kind of slant to it as well as a technical and tactical emphasis as well. So players really bought into maybe going up an age group or dropping an age group in a way. So we were mixing them depending on their kind of stage of maturation, whether they were early maturers or later maturers. So you're kind of leveling the playing field. And we were really able to get some good success. So more success for the players in terms of touches on the ball, more enjoyment, more motivation, more leadership skills were developed. So that was a really great thing to kind of add to the coaching piece from a sports science perspective to aid these players' development. And I think just generally in terms of sports science, the physical coach, whoever that is, can impart a lot of kind of wisdom and education. I think from US soccer's point of view, education is such a massive thing in our high performance department, especially in soccer where maybe sports science is still in its infancy a little bit compared to other sports. And I think if we continue that education piece, whether it's nutrition, recovery, fitness work, just looking after yourself as an athlete, as a player, I think that's a massive thing, whether they come into the academy at a young age, and then we track them and kind of nurture them through those higher age groups with the goal of getting them to the first team. So I believe that continued education prepares them to be that really top player where we want them to be, because we may only see them for a couple hours a day in a club. You may have them for training 2, 3, 4 hours, but what are they doing for the rest of the day? And I think it's kind of embodying them or empowering them to be that 24-hour athlete and be the continued professional. Looking after yourself, what are you doing to be better, to make yourself 100% available for the coach and then go out and perform on the pitch? So a big education piece from our point of view within the football club.
And sports science is not new to soccer, but certainly newer than any other sports. Any of the rest of you, would you like to contribute to that at all? In terms of how sports science is really perhaps evolving in your club or your association?
Yeah.
Your federation?
It's a really important piece. Mainly, we are using a specific training. It means specific training is really aggressive. Then we need the sports science helping us to the injury prevention. We need them as well to control the load because we are training to a specific. It means that for us, if we want to improve the level of the players, the most important content is technical and tactical content. But as well, we need to take care about the players. And for us, sports science is an important piece to help us in order to control the load and to prevent the injury prevention.
Derek?
I love the fact that sports science has come into soccer. I really do, and certainly in America, and I think that there's great data. I think one of the things we've got to be a little bit careful of is that, you know, at the high end, the professional, the Schalkers and the national team level, it's certainly a support to these high-level players. I think it's that next tier down where sometimes it can be misconstrued. And if you look at, you know, there's certain times in a child's development where sports science is going to be more applicable. And I think if, you know, my thought's always been, in the early stages, it should the whole focus should be on skill acquisition. Kids learning to be with the ball, playing with the ball, and at the younger ages, you don't get that much time that you would maybe with a national team or a professional team. So, the sort of the grassroots level, you've really got to get them playing, and then, just before they go into this maturation and hit puberty, then you've got to really start to look at sports science, movement patterns, for injury prevention and to support the growth through, but still maintaining that skill level. And I think where we really do need to get an insight now into maximising youth performance is in the social and psychological side of the game. That's the next bit. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I'm working with a company now, Soccer Mindset, where you've really got to, because that's when the kids now come into the real competitive phase of soccer, so you've got the skill acquisition, the growth, and, they're fundamental throughout the development of any player. But once you get to sort of 16, 18, with all of the sports science and with all of the resources that modern players in professional academies have, now the reason kids don't make it is because of their mindset. It's because of their, they're almost, it's almost impossible to fail with the support network that you have around them. And I think that's where I'd really now like to see some more sports science and more data introduced into soccer at all the levels to help get these players on. They say, tennis players, golf players, it's 95% in the head. And with modern lifestyles now, and you've got youth players coming from different countries and settling in. As I said, that's the bit, the social, and I think that's why professional clubs in England are looking at player welfare officers and stuff like that to get them over that hurdle. And I think if we can water that down into, club soccer, DAs, so that all children get an access to that, I think it's going to help. And I think this is where these technology companies now, they're getting apps that any kid can use if you've got a smartphone. And I think the most important thing Andy said is tracking data. Data's great, but you've got to track it and then you've got to apply it to the individual. And how much, I'd be interested, how much is done individual positions? The goalie compared to the striker, compared to the winger. And I'm sure that might be a question that's asked later on.
You heard? Matthias?
Yeah, data is, or sports science is really important. So at the age of 16, 17, to have the load, to have all the numbers of the things, and also for the coach from the first team, he can have a look and see how is the development of his blood lactate. I don't know if it's the lactate in German, and it's really important that you have that you have everything to see and what had he done before, and his injuries and everything like this. So it's really important also for the first team coach that he can see what happened to this player in his youth.
Yeah. Just one more question that I have for the group, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So I hope we have some audience question. And this is, I don't want it to seem like a loaded question, but how much does a club's methodology get influenced by that first team manager and coaches? And how does that influence the youth program, the youth academy? Is the first team coach the leader of this, or not so much?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I think the method has to be implemented at the academy first. Then you need to let the players grow with one method, with one idea, with one identity. Then you have to choose what is the profile of the players that you want in your academy, what are the methods that you want to implement in your academy, what is the game style that you want to implement in your academy, and let the players grow in that environment. What happened with the first team? Very often the coach of the main team left because the results are not good, then you change that. I think was one coach of Barça, Tito Villanova, journalist made this question one time and said, okay, you are teaching the academy, or you are showing to the academy the way that they have to play, and say, no, it's the academy who has to show us the way that we have to play. Because if you are coaching a player during 10 years in the same way, with the same method, with the same ideas, with the same criteria, then the good following step is to play in the first team in the same way that he was trained when he was young.
Sure. Anybody else? First team coach get much influence in this process?
I think as a youth developer, I think your job is to produce well-rounded players, position-specific players. And you know, if you look at the 4 cornerstones of development, the sort of technical, the tactical, the social, and the physical. You know, if you can produce solid players all round, and you know, no club produces just lots of left backs or lots of centre backs. You know, you produce well-rounded players that can go in, and you know, there's been numerous occasions. I think Rio Ferdinand. You know, some of those that remember him, he was a centre forward. He was a midfield player, but when he went and played in the first team, he became a defender. So someone somewhere said, we want to play football out from the back, so we want a 6'4" player that can come out from the back. So I think in true clubs, if you can get a first team coach that really wants to support the academy and wants to have it, I think it's fairly rare in modern day soccer now, because the lifespan of a first team coach can be 18 months. You know, the real success of most youth academies that people are there for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and you take a cycle, you know, the 11-year-old through to 17 and 18. So I think that the academy's job is slightly different, and you know, most academies will have a philosophy on how they want to produce their players. I don't think there'll be a conveyor belt of the same type of player, and I think that a really good academy curriculum will support that. The next thing, the final thing I'll say on the first team is that the first team system has to adapt a lot more, don't they? Because they're results driven.
Sure.
Whereas an academy is really, the result is how many kids, how many players can you get into the first team? I think that's easy to say, but it's very hard to implement, because everyone who plays soccer wants to win games. And you know, sometimes you can have a great youth team, but if none of the kids go through to the first team, is it a successful academy?
Yeah.
So,
And in many ways, that's the ultimate measure.
yes, it is.
It is. You want to answer that?
Yeah, I think from a physical point of view, it's important in my role more and more these days in kind of modern soccer that I understand what the coach or coaches that I'm working with or the philosophy of the academy is, and how I need to prepare the players. It's one thing just making them fit, generally, universally,
Sure.
but can I get them fit in the way that the coach wants them to play? In that specific philosophy, in that style, can they tolerate those demands during the week when they're training, as well as on a Saturday when they're playing a game? So if they're a fullback, can I get them to play or to tolerate the demands of how the coach wants them to play? So that's really, really important from my point of view, that there's that relationship and understanding there from that academy philosophy, as well as just the physical piece.
Matthias?
So yeah, the influence in our club is not so big from the first coach, because as you said, how long is he here? How long is he in our club? Maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. We hope a long time, because then we are successful. But yeah, mostly it's 2 years. But the academy, we have our own philosophy, and we want to develop each player to make the next step to the professionals. And in all these things, you have to have different systems. You have to learn a 4-3-3, a 4-4-2. Different things, because if the coach changed and he said, my system now is 4-3-3, then our player, they can play this. Yeah. If you have only the one way, like the Ajax school, 4-3-3, if then they left the club and go to another club, maybe the coach want to play a 4-4-2 and say, well, the players say sometimes, oh no, I can't play this. In my whole youth, I was trained in the 4-3-3. So we want to have them more in other options and to be bigger.
It does speak to the brevity of the career of a first-team coach in some ways. What I'd like to do, thank you very much, gentlemen.
There's
Yes,
one
sorry.
idea that I want
Please.
to. I think the academy, we have academy is the good place to try to improve the level of the players to become professional. But I think at the same time, we have to do the same job with the coaches. Okay, academy is not just for the players, it's as well for the coaches. Then we need to use the academies as well to promote the coaches to be professional. And the best way to try to involve the players coming from the academy to the first team is to try to move as well coaches from the academy to the first team. I think it's the best way to try to implement a team with a good and club with a good identity.
Great.
But if I can say something about this, because we build also the coaches, we want to develop the coaches, but what is a good coach? When is a coach really good? Is he good if the under-17s, under-19s win championship or win the league or everything? No. For us, the best coach is who brings the most player from the under-15 to the under-16, from the under-16 to under-17. It's the best coach for us, and this is what we have to look for. In the past, I think it was a little bit, so we made also mistakes. All coaches, they have their match plans and they want to win the games and want to be successful, because then they, in their mind, there is, oh, I'm a good coach because I won these matches, I won the league. But that's not the way. And in Germany, it was a little bit like this, and all the coaches were the same style, and we tried to break it a little bit and have more coaches for develop every single player and not the team to be a better team. It's better to have more players to make the next step in the next age group.
No, for example, this is my job. Okay, I am the technical director. I have to choose the coaches in the national teams, and we cannot use if the coaches are winning or losing as a criteria to try to promote them. Okay, we need to identify the good coaches, helping the players with a good methodology, implementing the ideas that we want to implement, that this is the kind of the coaches that we want to promote to the first team.
Yeah, thank you. What I'd like to do now is open it up to our audience. Do we have some audience questions? We have a mic back there, please.
Hi, a question for Andy. And I didn't hear your first part of the panel, so I apologize if you already answered this. But after the World Cup, the women's national team kind of publicized that they used a very innovative planning and training regime around menstrual cycle planning, and talked a lot about how the menstrual cycle was linked to injury rates in female athletes as well as performance parameters. And given at the youth level, the number, or at least apparently it seems that girls tend to suffer injuries at higher rates, especially things like ACL tears, than boys. I was wondering if you guys are looking at taking some of that sort of cutting edge stuff around menstrual cycle planning and bringing it to the youth national teams.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, obviously that was driven with the senior team by Dawn Scott, the lead fitness coach there. So that has or is being kind of disseminated down through the youth team. So my colleagues Ellie Mabry and Julian, who's at the back there, both on the women's side are implementing menstrual cycle tracking, specific strength and conditioning programs, injury prevention programs for our national team players at U20, U17 in particular. For those World Cup teams. So there's a constant dialogue between those guys, the players, their coaches, in terms of keeping their monitoring going, but their physical development to try and reduce the risk of those type of injuries. And obviously it depends where that player is at. Very, very dependent on kind of their club environment. What resources do they have? But then how can we adapt our support to suit that player best for what they have access to in terms of coaches, other strength and conditioning staff, gyms, but also depending on their kind of their schedule. Are they playing for club as well as national team, their college's national team? Like, how can they modify their load remotely and safely by constant communication? So all those type of things that the women's national team do in terms of remote tracking and data collection, they are filtering through those Youth World Cup teams for sure.
Another coach?
Good evening, great panel. My question really is for all of you, and it specifically has to do with U.S. youth soccer, high school soccer, and also the college game, and the load of playing 2 games one weekend or even 3 games, depending on the tournament. How do you manage that as a coach or as a club, really? Because this is the structure we're in. Obviously, we're not going to change. But with the science coming into play, is there anything humanly possible that you can do to prepare or better prepare an athlete for that?
I'll take that one. I mean, I work here in the US, and I think that's the challenge to US soccer. I think structurally, and in Germany, I'm sure they don't play 2 games in 24 hours. I know we didn't at Crystal Palace, and I think that one of the great roles that sports science can do is produce the data so that it forces US soccer to start to change that that function of having too many games in one day, and or in a weekend, I should say. The reality is where US soccer is slightly different is in the distances that you have to travel to get competitive games at the higher age, at the higher level, sorry. So if you look at, you know, the geographic map of America, for two MLS teams to play a real balanced games program, you know, they've got to get on an aeroplane. So I think that's where cost comes in. I think they've got to, you know, as the foot map of US soccer, professional soccer grows in this country, I think it will become more evident that the pro clubs are going to have to step up, start taking hold of youth development and saying that using the sports science data that we only do need to play one good game. I'm sure if we did the training ratio to games from a Schalke player to an American DA player, it would probably be, 5 or 6 to 1, maybe 7 or 8 to 1 training sessions to games at Schalke. And in America, it could be sometimes you train 3 times a week and you play 3 games. So that it's definitely something. Sports science data is what's going to help us change the structure here in America.
The NCAA has also just recently released a sports science report that accumulates, I think, 2 years of soccer data. And what they say is it's going to make a significant impact on sort of how they handle all their championship series and whatnot. Because in many cases, they're playing games, 2 games in 24 hours, especially in the lower divisions.
I mean, mate, I could ask you, how many training sessions a week do your 16-year-olds play to one game?
The under 16 normally have 4 training sessions in a week and 1 game on the weekend.
There you go. So
very different.
Under 16 could have 3 a week and then play 2, sometimes 3 games at a tournament weekend. So, you know, it's inevitable. You're going to get injuries, you're going to get fatigue. I was on a panel earlier on today where they talked about nutrition, and, you know, there's no way you can refuel in that time to be 100% to start the second and the third game. And in most of these tournaments, the third game is the final, the most important one, and the kids are playing almost on empty tanks. So coaches see a different game, spectators see a different game. It needs changing, and I think people like Andy with their sports science data can be the ones that influence the change.
Anybody else want to add to that? Dan?
Yeah, I think hopefully that these types of themes can be addressed more and kind of push the clubs and kind of the management there to invest in this type of thing. Sports science, strength and conditioning, performance coaches. It's going to benefit them, and when they have a schedule as you might have with 2-3 games in a weekend, we need to do better at trying to negate the ill effects of that, because it ultimately boils down to player safety. So if we can educate, again, coaches, administrators and key stakeholders like that, we can try and ultimately reduce injury rates and kind of guide them in better ways of planning, of travel, of game scheduling, and just load management to protect our players and hopefully reduce that injury rate, because I think performance coaches and sports science can really help to guide that and reduce injury rates, but kind of improve performance as well for our youth team players.
Other questions? Well, if not, on that note, I would like to thank all of our panelists so much for your time and your expertise today. Thank you very much. I get one last shameless plug for United Soccer Coaches, however, just one last one. United Soccer Coaches, and for many of you, you may not be familiar with it, we are the Coaches Association for the U.S., but not just U.S. coaches, we also include many international coaches. We are the largest coaches association in the world with 30,000 members. And if you have never attended the January Coaches Convention in this country, we hope that you will join us in Baltimore in January 15 to 17. We're expecting about 15,000 people in total. And it's an unusual and unique American experience in many ways. It brings together coaches, but it really brings together all the facets of our game. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to my panelists. And we appreciate your time. We hope you enjoy the whole event. Thank you. Thank you.